All right, so now comes this is the one in the Gulf. This one in the Gulf, at the end of it, really something spectacular happened, which was neat. This was right as we started descending down our descent line, and there's a remora there. I can't tell what was with it, maybe a juvenile banded rudderfish that was swimming there with it. But I was hoping the remora would follow us down more, but it didn't. It looks a little green at first, but the colors, more of the true colors come into play here. It was rather dark down there that day. I think about the first 25 feet or so of the water, there was a lot of floating sediment and stuff in the water, so it kind of was blocking the sun out. But my lights come into play here more. So those real plentiful fish, those are ruby red lips. So if you've ever gone fishing and you're on a very healthy reef, they're like little bait stealers. They call them ruby red lips because their mouth parts actually extend out a little bit. And when they do so, they're very bright red on the inside. So hence the name ruby red lips. The triggerfish, there were two large triggerfish on this one again. And there were other times when I went down too. I'm really going to have to compare this video to the other videos that I have and the markings on them and see if they are the same. I think they may be, and these were particularly large triggerfish that were on there. Lionfish, you can see some there too. And I think I counted 4 or 5 lionfish on this. Relatively large adults. I didn't clean them off on this one at the last time I talked, and you said no, just go ahead and leave them, just to see how things are going. But maybe next time, I can go down there and get rid of those for you. But you can see, and the ruby red lips are much more plentiful on this dive than in the past. And you can see also how they kind of prefer that outside overhang area. And the triggerfish actually just love that. They feel very well protected up underneath there. And you can also tell too how it really hasn't sunken into the stand too much. Now that right there, that's a red snapper, believe it or not. As you go deeper under the water, I'm going to pause it here. Well, I won't pause. But as you go deeper under the water, you lose the color red first. So the red snapper actually look white down under there. Now that second fish after the snapper, those were soapfish. And soapfish also belong to sea bass and grouper family, and they call them that because their skin is kind of velvety, almost like soap. So that's a butterfly fish right there. There was a pair of 2 of them, and that's the way they often travel. You see them in pairs, in mating pairs. Beautiful coloration on that. Probably large too, probably about 5 to 6 inches tall. There's a lionfish. Puffer fish down inside that hole, but I get a closer look at him there here in a few moments. There's a lot of nice life going on there. Much of the reddish orangish color that you actually see on the reef are sponges. Some of it, like the orange, is a fire sponge. Or actually, if you get too close and agitate it too much, and you can feel it kind of itching, slight burn to your skin a little bit. Nice lionfish shot there. And you can see here, really how large that triggerfish is. That's really a large triggerfish. And they call them triggerfish because of the 2 spikes up on their head. They kind of work in unison, almost like the trigger of a gun. And what they're there for is really for defense. If something is trying to attack it in defense, or if something is trying to eat it, it'll actually put that sharp spine upwards to poke the inside of a predator's mouth, or also to make it appear bigger. That, well, again, is a red snapper, believe it or not, but they look white down at depth like that. Inexperienced fishermen, spear fishermen, sometimes will shoot a red snapper down there because they look white, thinking that they are not red snapper. Then as they get it close to the surface, they realize that they shot, perhaps illegally, a red snapper. Now those right there, those are called fireworms. Some people also call them bristleworms. And they call them fireworms because they're covered with those tiny little hairs. Some of them you can't even see, they're so fine, and they penetrate your skin so easily if you're not careful, and it gives it like a burning sensation from the toxin that it releases. And that's why the fish don't bother them. These are some of my favorite crabs right here. They're called arrow crabs, mainly because their head is shaped like an arrowhead. And they're blue claws. They are just amazing, aren't they? They are fun little creatures. that you can pick them up in your hand easily. If you hold your finger out, it'll actually kind of extend its claw and pinch you just slightly, and you can actually almost kind of shake hands with it. They're really fun little guys. And there's another one too. And I saw numerous arrow crabs on the reef. I didn't want to film every one of them because they all, look very similar. But this really shows the beauty of those creatures. And here's one of the pufferfish again. I counted about 4 or 5 of these pufferfish. This is called a Caribbean sharp-nosed pufferfish. And unlike other pufferfish where their whole bodies blow up and they have like little spines all over them, like more like porcupine fish or those types of pufferfish, this one really just their belly kind of poofs up when they're being threatened. And they can release a toxin like all other pufferfish can if they're being eaten. This is a nice sponge right here. To me, this is a very beautiful sponge. It almost kind of looks like a carnation or something like that. As you probably know, sponges are filter feeders. And even the day we went down, there was a strong current. Oh, that little fan coming out there, those are barnacles. So every time I've been there, there's been somewhat of a current. So it takes a lot of particles through there. And I think that's really why there's so much sponge on there, just because of the nice currents that pass through that area. Just off to the side, showing some of the fish going off. And there's another soap fish right there. You can also see some of the white sponge there covering the reef. More soap fish underneath. And here I just kind of pan across, showing you the nice variety of small sponges and things like that have just completely taken over the reef. I mean, there's really not any more of the actual build material shown. It is practically completely covered in sea life. And you can see all those little barnacles. I mean, millions and millions of little barnacles covering your reef and providing home as they all mate and release larvae and eggs, and it just provides a nice feeding ground for all of the sea life. There's a clam. He was actually open just a touch more before I started shining, and then my slight movement of the camera created a little wave, I think, and then he kind of closed up about halfway, but you could still see his mantle inside. Just more of the nice spongy, corally sea life on the reef. Another one of the triggerfish, one of the two of the pair. Another sharp-nosed puffer. And just look at all that sea life. Sea urchin on the inside there. Beautiful, healthy triggerfish, and large. There's a porgy. There were a few of them, but they were kind of keeping their distance. I imagine when I would leave that they would come closer. There's a damselfish that's swimming by. It's actually called a 2-spot damselfish. They can say, I know you'd think one because that's one you see, but they consider one of the other spots being the actual eye of the fish. There's a belted sandfish. There's a cup coral. And you can see it's much larger. That one's probably about 5-6 inches across. And they had these beautiful little crabs on the inside. It's very tiny. I'd say probably half an inch long or so. But I was able to get some nice micro shots of those cool little guys hiding in the coral. I think a lot of people would miss those little fellas in there, but you have to have a nice macro lens to get in that close on them. Maybe they were probably 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch. And there was a pair of butterfly fish there. A nice wide variety of sea life living on your reef. So one of the cool things that happened on this dive, it was really quite extraordinary. When we went back up to the surface, when we got back in that haze, we were down about 20 feet. A group of, I think, 3 dolphin passed by us. I mean, very close to us. You could see I can practically touch them there. When we were coming up, we were actually off of the ascent line. The current took us off a little bit. We were probably 50 yards from the boat. We had to swim back against the current back to the boat. You can kind of see it in the distance over there. And the dolphin stayed with us the whole time, much of the time within touching reach. I didn't include all the footage here because a lot of it was similar, but the diver that I went with, Zach, he was filming with a GoPro also. In fact, he never turned his off. And we determined from his video that we swam with the dolphins for about 13 minutes. And what was fascinating was that they always stayed close to us, almost leading us back to the boat like they were concerned because we were in somewhat of a strong current. And as soon as we got back to the boat and started putting up our gear back onto the back swim deck, one of the dolphins came probably 4 feet from me and did 3 slow tail slaps on top of the water, kind of like a bap, 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 almost to say like, okay, you guys are back and you're okay now, so we're going to take off. And I just almost kind of instinctively slapped the water with my hand 3 times in return, and then they just gently took off to the front of the boat, and we didn't see him again after that. It was really like a once-in-a-lifetime kind of experience there. I have probably over 5,000 dives in my lifetime, and I've seen dolphins underwater probably a total of 4 times, if I recall correctly. And all of them were dolphins passing, once, and that was it. Never an experience like this. So I really do think it was like a once-in-a-lifetime kind of experience. I mean, how long they stayed with us, and it was like they were actually helping us and taking care of us, which was fascinating. And and this happened right over your reef. So that's way cool. So that's, I think, just about the end of the video. So if you have any other questions, or you want another version where I remove this narrative and I include, I include the music and said I'm happy to do that for you. And I know also that what we're gonna be working on next is a portion where we kind of show over time how your reefs are doing, and I'm looking forward to doing that with you as well. So I hope you enjoy this, Morris, and thank you for the opportunity, and I will talk with you soon.